Why are you still upset about this? My sister and I invited two work friends over last night for some home-made pizza and drinks. These coworkers are good friends of ours and knew my ex. One of them had been cheated on in a previous relationship, so she has been very comforting during this time. Anyways, last night the topic of my ex came up, and I enjoyed talking some trash with one of the friends and my brother-in-law while my sister and the other friend were on the couch talking about something. I may have gotten a little loud during my talking session, and my sister says, "Why are you still upset about this? You're smart and funny, and you shouldn't be still on this. Why are you so upset still?" I then looked at her and almost started crying as I tried to say it's just not that easy when my brother-in-law chimes in and says, "They were together for 9 years, that's how long we've been together." Can you imagine right now if I said I was cheating and just moved out, and she sat there, quiet? A serious shout out to my brother-in-law and friends who clearly saw that my sister was being insensitive. I couldn't believe that my own sister was invalidating my feelings when she's seen firsthand what I've been going through the past 5 months. I guess it's true that some people really don't care about things unless it directly affects them. Asterisk. Also, just for clarity, I'm female. My brother-in-law is married to my sister's story too. My grandmother is disabled and my uncle is taking her money and emotionally abusing her. TLDR. My grandmother is blind and disabled and my uncle takes her money and ignores her on a daily. She is depressed, but my family cannot bring her to the US and she is slowly fading away. This is a long story backstory. My 40-year-old uncle still lives with my grandmother. She has always tolerated his for some reason, but has always treated him like a favorite son. Well, he brought his now wife into her house without even asking for permission. One day she came to visit us in Tijuana, and by the time she was back, the woman was living there. She had a baby, and they were a big happy family. Please note the sarcasm. Fast forward a few years, and my grandmother began having health problems because of diabetes. She lives in Mexico City. She went to visit her family in Guanajuato, in a rural village, and there she fell and scraped her foot. She got sick and couldn't keep any food down, and the local doctors tried to help the infection. After a few days, she got worse and her wound began to look bad. They were told to take her to a hospital fast. They didn't have a car, so they called my uncle and told him to drive down to take her to a hospital. He didn't want to. He complained about having to borrow a car, and my brother, who was traveling nearby at the time, was the one who lent him the car when my parents told him what was going on. My uncle drove down grudgingly and picked her up. They told him to keep her foot elevated and to hurry. He did neither. Mind you, she was close to delirious by now, so she couldn't really do it herself. He drove for hours and even stopped for some food. Then instead of taking her directly to the hospital, he took her to my aunt's house. My aunt isn't a super loving daughter either. She's quite cold actually, but she is a decent person. She took my grandmother to the hospital and my mother got on a plane from the US to Mexico City. Oh, my mother had been aware of the whole situation, but considering she didn't have the money to fly almost 3,000 miles, she did the best she could. When my mother got there, she spoke with the doctors, and they told her that she was likely going to die. My mother and aunt called everyone they had ever known and got a referral to a private hospital with a specialist. They took my grandmother there and they decided they would all split the bill. The doctors said that my grandmother was too weak to survive the surgery, but that she had an infection in her leg that was advancing too fast. They had to cut off her leg because it had eaten through the bone, and if they waited too long, it would reach her heart in a matter of hours. My grandmother told my mom to let her die so she would stop being a burden, but my mother and aunt decided to have the surgery. She survived, but was basically depressed. He recovered, and there was the plan to get her the prosthetic after she healed. My mother had to come back home, but everything had been set in place. Unfortunately, eventually my grandmother also lost her eyesight because of diabetes, and this led her to fall into a depression. To not make matters longer, my uncle sometimes just decides to stop speaking to her for whatever transgression she supposedly has. He does ask for her money, though, which isn't much to begin with. My mother once caught him trying to siphon some of the money she had sent my grandma, and he didn't give. My mother can't bring her to the US because we don't have the resources yet. My aunt hardly visits her. We send her money and go when we can, but it isn't often because we aren't exactly rich. She can't even say anything to my uncle because she loves him and because in her eyes, she'll be left to fend for herself with the hardship of being old, blind, and disabled. He wouldn't leave, of course, because he has basically taken over the house and leaves her in her room most of the day. Since he's currently offended for whatever stupid reason he came up with, his wife is the one that brings her food, and she sometimes plays with her grandchildren, but that's it. The only respite she has is when some family friends go over during the weekends, but they are also sometimes mistreated by my uncle's wife for being there, and they stop coming for a few weeks. He also never bothered taking her to get her prosthetic leg, so she can only get in her wheelchair, but she needs someone to take her everywhere, even her garden. She is depressed and rarely does she have a good day. She's fading away, and sometimes, when I call her, she says that she can feel that death is at most a couple of years away. Overall, it's just a horrible situation, and we can't really do much about it because she'll say he isn't emotionally abusing her and lies afraid of being left alone to fend for herself. We can't do anything because we can't bring her over and don't have anyone to take care of her. I just want to be able to take her out of the house. BTW, she loves that house. She built it from the ground up and used to keep a beautiful garden. Now my uncle stole the house's deed so she can't sell it. And bring her here. All she wants is her family. She is starved of love, and that's something we can give her. She doesn't need to be treated like a disabled person. She just needs to be reminded that she is loved and that there is good in life. She used to love sewing, embroidering, and cooking. God, she made the most amazing food. She would have been a chef if she had been able to pay for school. She would also make us the prettiest clothes. She just needs to be reminded that she's our grandmother and that she doesn't need to have a use to be loved. I was raised to not wish ill upon people, and although I have not been able to convey just how vile my uncle can be, he is a great uncle, but a horrible, horrible son. Towards my grandma, I truly do hope that one day he experiences even a modicum of what he is putting my grandmother through. I wish him ill, or at least that karma will one day. What would you do in this situation, Street 3? BF has STDs and didn't tell me. I, 34F. Found out today my BF, 30M. I have been dating, has had hepatitis B for 4 years, and has also once had warts, which were removed around the same time he found out he had hepatitis B. He told me both can't be passed on as his Hep B is nearly undetectable in his blood, meaning his virtual load is so low he can't pass it on, and the warts can't be passed on once treated and gone, which they have been for nearly 4 years, which is why he didn't tell me until now. I'm sitting here not really knowing anything about ether, but the small amount I do know, I feel what he's saying isn't true. I booked myself in for an STD appointment, but they are so busy it's not till 3 weeks' time, and I'm pretty shocked, as you can imagine. We only had protected sex, but this came up, as he's now refusing to use condoms anymore, as he doesn't like them, and I wanted him to get tested before. That's when he told me about his past. I'm really unsure of what risk I'd take by continuing the relationship. I really don't want to catch either of these things, but until now everything has been great between us. TLDR, BF has had hepatitis B and warts. Didn't think he needed to tell me. Only found out as I wanted him to get tested, as he hates condoms and I won't take the risk having unprotected sex without a clean test.